Hi, I'm Sarah Dugdale and this is a book or 10. In my last video I talked about my favourite books and what I'm currently reading. This time I thought I would talk a little bit about what I'm hoping to read in this last bit of the year. So coming into December, where did the year go? So it's just some of the books that are forefront in my mind as we come to this last part, what I would like to get out of the way before we go into 2021. It's a bit of an ambitious list, so I've got a stack of 8 books here to talk about. I have no idea whether I'll get to them all, but these are the ones that I'll be picking from, basically, probably. Of course, it could be that something else pops up that it looks really exciting and jumps in ahead of the queue. It can always happen. I sometimes find that I read quite a lot between Christmas and New Year, in those weird in-between days that don't feel like any particular day. So maybe I'll get through loads in that time and suddenly blast through all of my reading goals for the year. Maybe I will only read 2 of these. Maybe I'll only finish the ones I'm reading at the moment. But either way, myself any specific reading goals in terms of number of books I wanted to read, simply because I wanted to take the pressure off myself. I set myself a goal last year that I thought was way under what I usually would set myself. I'd usually be setting myself, 40, 50, 60 books that I wanted to read in a year. Last year I went for 25 and I didn't hit it. I think I got 22, so I wasn't far off. But I also had a baby last year at the beginning of the year, so that obviously slowed down my reading, and apparently more than I'd anticipated. So what I actually did in 2020 was set my Goodreads goal to 1, so I hit that really quickly. And it's actually just quite nice to go in and see it say you're at 24,000% of your goal. It's strangely motivating, the ways in which Goodreads controls our lives. But what I did do in 2020 was make myself what I've been calling my sweetie list, which is essentially a list of lots of books that I've never read, but whenever they come up in conversation, whenever I hear them mentioned, I always think, oh, I should have read that, or oh, I'm sure that I would enjoy that. Why haven't I read that? So I made myself a little list of some of those books, not all of them, and decided that actually when I was looking for something to read in 2020, that was where I was going to look. So the first one on my stack, this is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. So this is one from my sweetie list. This is a memoir that she wrote following the death of her husband. So if you can say that grief memoirs are a genre, they're ones that I'm quite interested in. I find death, bereavement, all quite interesting subjects, and also something that touches all of us in very personal ways. I am also a writer, and my first book, which I'm currently finishing, is about grief and about living following a serious bereavement. So I also have a kind of professional interest in books on that topic. So I'm really interested in getting to this one. Obviously, it's an intense subject matter, so it depends whether I'm feeling in the mood. But I do find non-fiction can be quite good to read alongside fiction and get through more books at once, just if you need that change of pace. If you perhaps aren't in the mood to pick up the novel that I'm reading, I can still be doing reading and finishing books by having some non-fiction to switch to instead. So that's my sort of first one. And then this is another from my sweetie list. So this is If on a Winter's Night a Traveller by Italo Calvino. Italo Calvino? I do not know if I'm saying that correctly. Tell me in the comments if you can confirm how that name is meant to be said. So yes, there's another one from my sweetie list. I know very little about this book other than I've seen it in bookshops all the time, and pick it up, read the back and go, oh yeah, I think I'd like that. And then I put it down and buy something else, and I couldn't figure out why. This remarkable novel leads you through many different books, including a detective adventure, a romance, a satire, an erotic story, a diary and a quest. But the hero of them all is you, the reader. It just sounds incredibly different to anything that I've ever read. I'm in 2 workplace book clubs, one which I run, one which I just participate in. One of the books we were reading for one of those earlier in the year, which I didn't actually finish because life took over and I couldn't go to the meetings, and then I just lost a bit of motivation, even though I was really enjoying the book. was The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. So this book has been on my shelf for so long. I think I bought this very shortly after she won the Booker Prize for it, so that was in 2013. And usually I have a rule of if something's been on my shelf for 2 years and I've not read it or not wanted to read it, then it shouldn't be there anymore. So this has persisted on my shelves simply because every time I look at it, I know I am going to read that at some point. I am. So I would really like to get to this. So I finished part 1 of this book essentially, and then just stopped. But I would really like to pick it up again, go back in, finish it, because I was really enjoying it. Eleanor Catton is amazing at describing characters. Those descriptions are absolutely amazing. Actually, as I'm currently reading Middlemarch, the way she goes into those descriptions of characters reminds me of George Eliot, actually, now that I think about it. But so I would really like to get to this one and finish it if I possibly could. So the next one on my stack, I'm not really sure whether I'll read this book this year. So this is a sequel. This is Postscript, which is Cecelia Ahern's sequel to P.S. I Love You. Now, I love P.S. I Love You. I read it as a teenager. I have a lot of thoughts about the film adaptation. We won't go into that right now. But P.S. I Love You as a book means a lot to me. I think I learned a lot from it when I was a teenager about the notion of being a grown-up. And Cecelia Ahern, for all she's put in the kind of box of women's fiction, I think is a wonderful observer of character and of relationships between people and how they get you through. So this is the sequel. What I really want to do before I read this, because it's been a few years since I read P.S. I Love You, is reread it. I don't have a physical copy of P.S. I Love You before. I've had 2 copies of P.S. I Love You in the past, and one I lent to a friend and never got back. Unforgivable. The other, I have no idea where it went. I think it got lost while moving, possibly. So I don't have a physical copy anymore. I have a Kindle copy. So I would really like to read that before I go into this one. So the next book is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I have not read any V.E. Schwab, despite I've followed her on Twitter for several years and love seeing all of her tweets about writing and about her books, but I've never read any of them. I've got one other on my shelves, which is This Savage Song, which I bought several years ago. I think I started it, I think I read the first chapter or so, and then just didn't carry on. I cannot remember why that should have happened. But maybe if I read Addie LaRue, maybe I will fall in love with V.E. Schwab's writing and get to this one as well. But that's not on the stack for this year. The one that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So the reason I was so excited about this one, other than I keep seeing people having read it and loving it, is that, as I said, I've been following Schwab on Twitter for several years, so I feel like I've gone through the process of her writing this book, sort of hovering over her shoulder, and seeing her updates on the story and the writing process. So I'm just really interested, and also it sounds absolutely magnificent. So this follows the story of Addie LaRue, who essentially makes a deal with the devil to live forever, but everybody she meets will forget her, so she will not be remembered by anyone. So the next one on my list is Solutions and Other Problems by Allie Brosh. I was so excited that this book is out in the world, finally. I loved Hyperbole and a Half by Allie Brosh, both the book and before that when it was in blog format. Allie Brosh has a magnificent way of describing both the incredibly funny moments of life and the incredibly heart-wrenching and low moments in a spectacular observant detail. So if you're not familiar with Hyperbole and a Half, this is essentially a sort of a memoir. So these are personal stories which she illustrates in her kind of very distinctive fashion. So very excited about that. So then to my last book, I talked about in my last video my favourites, which included Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. This is the sequel, which has just come out. This is The Wonder Boy of Whistle Stop. I don't know if it's actually out in the UK. This is the US edition, and it was the only one I could find to order online. But knowing it existed, I couldn't not have it in my life. So Fried Green Tomatoes followed The Whistle Stop Cafe, run by Ruth and Iggy Threadgood. So this book picks up Bud Threadgood, or Buddy, who is Ruth's son, and his life, and I believe the life of his daughter. So also, as I said in that other video, although I love Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, I've never read any other Fannie Flagg. So this is a really nice place to start with branching out with her books, and then who knows, maybe after I read this one, I'll want to pick up some of her other work. So those are the books I'm hoping to read in the end of this year. Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!